Welcome to the Conscious Creators podcast. This week is really exciting because I actually have a guest on after doing a couple solo episodes. But originally, I wanted to start and have guests on, especially like Jason today. So we had connected, I guess, just a couple weeks ago now on an Instagram post that you did that I really related with and we'll definitely dive into. But as an idea for the listeners, Jason Crouse has, as a background, had stumbled upon sales and found himself in the personal development journey, hungry to learn more about himself and the world and how he sees it. He had a long-term relationship and kind of feeling stuck in the career, not feeling completely lit up by what he actually thought would make him happy, and leading him to tuning into deeper ways to know himself. So to now, where you're happily and very newly engaged and thriving where you are at, he's learned to find a sense of flow in the way he lives and actually sees life. So for the past 2 years coaching, he's been helping others find that sense of ease and flow in their lives. And recently his content has been absolutely blowing up online. And I truly feel is because he shares his message in a way that is easily digestible and puts words to what people feel but don't really know how to express. So he's choosing to consciously create a different way of experiencing life. And for that, I am really excited to have this conversation today. So, Jason, thank you for being here on the podcast.
Wow, what an intro. I am honored and humbled by that intro. And you're right, it has been a bit of a whirlwind these past few days. And I find myself in a place of being very appreciative of it all. And I'm really happy to be here and looking forward to getting into the things that I've learned that I think hopefully people listening can learn in order to become more creative and become creators of their experience in life.
Well, you have so much experience in what I like to call Earth School, because it's not necessarily like
Mm.
a degree or all these courses and stuff, but in Earth School, you have the experience, and that's everything that gives you enough like credibility to be like, here's what I've been through and what I know is true in my life and how it can possibly be true for others. Because in us being humans, we have a lot more in common in situations and how we feel about things than I think we realize. So yeah, excited to dive in because even just through the conversation we had prior, there were so many things you said that I was like, oh, that it just resonates so deeply with the way you convey that message. So on your profile and stuff, if people are seeing that, you are what is titled a flow coach, which I really enjoyed, but I had some questions with what is flow to you?
Yeah, great place to start. And your comment about Earth School has me chuckling because if the curriculum of Earth School is going through challenging times, I do think I might have my PhD. I am one of these people that has to learn the hard way, and it is something that I one day wonder if I'll ever learn a different way. But yeah, getting to this point or any point in my life has not been easy. Um, and yeah, that just made me chuckle. So I think about flow in a few different ways. Like number one, just to kind of simplify things, most people have probably experienced some element of flow in their life. Like I used to love surfing or playing sports, and would get find myself in a flow state where time would sort of disappear, where I was fully and totally present. I just didn't really understand that you could live that and have that experience in all of your life. And the way that I think about it is the state of being able to produce and create more and more with less and less energy. And could be thought of as the simultaneous experience of several desired emotional states. It's kind of another way of looking at it. And my work with people is helping them both put themselves in that position and stay longer, but also remove the things from their life that take them out of it, whether those are subconscious programs or whether those are mindsets or habits or beliefs that they have about the world. Often getting in flow is a process of removing, not just adding.
Mm. Yeah, I love that idea. 'Cause sometimes we actually need less instead of more. So I guess to go back into the piece that we talked about and that I had in your intro of that time when you were feeling stuck, I would love for you to share more on that experience because I'm sure that was a time when you didn't really have an idea of flow. And then was that also the time that flow was introduced to you of like, wait, this seems like I should be happy, but I'm not feeling this like ease of what's coming to me. It kind of felt like stuck or probably more resistance. Can you explain that time a bit?
Yeah, it is. I remember having this experience where I was driving home from the grocery store. I don't even remember exactly where I was coming home to, and I was coming home, and my I'm like holding the steering wheel, and I'm in this nice car that I just bought on my way back to this nice apartment, on my way back to my nice girlfriend, thinking about going back to my nice job on Monday, and 10 years flashed before my eyes in just a moment, and I saw myself at early 40s living this life and feeling like I was dying inside, even though this was the type of life that I thought that I had wanted. And it was around that time when I got connected with an executive coach who has been helping people for the last 30 years and is this like kind of whisperer guru type. He's very private, doesn't have any social media or anything like that. And he is quite a character. He's kind of got like a wizardly vibe. And I started working with him, and a lot of his teachings kind of remind me of Mr. Miyagi. For those who've seen Karate Kid, where it's like you'll be being taught a lesson that you don't fully understand what you're being taught until it applies. And so you get these aha moments of like, oh, that's why you were having me do that thing. Oh, that's why you kept repeating that same phrase over and over and over and over and over again. And it's taken me 9 months to finally hear you. Yeah, thank you for that. And so that began an exploration for me where it ultimately led to that relationship coming to an end, which then meant moving from San Francisco to San Diego, despite not knowing anyone, meeting all these new people, and really starting a whole new life. None of which I could have predicted, if it was something that was like, you know, pick exactly what your plan is and go do it. Like there's no way I could have foreseen where I ended up. And so one of the things that's beautiful about the flow is that it can bring you places that you couldn't predict. And I found myself in one of those now. So, yeah.
Yeah, I find the unknown is really scary though. For myself at times and a lot of people. What is, I guess, in that transition period when you got that coach, what was kind of that guiding thing of like, okay, this relationship seems awesome, but what if I leave and I feel like I made a mistake? What if I quit this job and I feel like I made a mistake? What was kind of, I guess, that like guiding thing for you to trust in the unknown in that moment when all was supposed to be so good and you had to trust that it was going to be better?
Mm, mm. Such a great question, and something that is a pattern. I mean, fear is a thing that even to this day I still notice my behavior being shaped around fear, and it's something that um, is so deeply ingrained into our psyche as human beings, with the idea of, hey, it would be best for us to stay alive. And we have parts of our brain that are responsible for that intention. And those parts of our brain are quite outdated. I've heard it described as sort of like our lizard brain. And so the fears that we have um, often get to be looked at in a different way, as long as you are kind of keeping in mind that, yeah, that maybe one of the phrases used, false evidence appearing real, that maybe your fears are not actually warranted or justified. And the phrase that helped me through that, the phrase that I kept coming back to, or the sort of maxim that I kept coming back to, is that I would rather die living on the other side of my fear. Like, I would rather die alone, like whatever my deepest, darkest fears were about leaving, like broke, alone, like under a bridge, whatever. Like I would rather die facing my fears than die living afraid of my fears. And when it got to that point, when I got to see it that way, the choices became pretty easy. It's like I'm going to die one way or another at some point. This is a this is not a permanent walk here. This is a temporary and fleeting thing. I better get to living as soon as I can.
Mm, I love that. I feel like I've heard that before, but like you said with your coach, you hear it, you hear it, you hear it, and then finally you're just like, you really actually hear it differently. And I'm like, oh, that is so good and such a good guiding point to kind of go back to talk yourself through those specific points of, yeah, that fear. Like it always seems worse than we think it is. So I love that that was what you were able to kind of come back to be able to move through that process. Was there any like actual physical practices or anything that you find kind of helped you get into the flow initially in the beginning, or even for like people that help coach, like is there any practices that you're like, hey, this helps you kind of, I guess, trust that more instead of a belief being a belief, how they can actually like embody that or apply that more physically, if that makes sense?
Great question. For me personally, there was there, I work a lot in metaphor, and so I love surfing, and surfing to me is a great metaphor in terms of being able to put a little bit of energy in order to catch a wave, and which you kind of think of as efforting. Like the flow requires some amount of efforting, it requires some amount of energy that you put into the system, and then it's the process of catching the wave, and then getting to enjoy the process of being on the wave. And that for me was a metaphor that I always really enjoyed. More, what if the physical practices, besides like kind of like surfing or playing sports or just being in the things where I found flow naturally and easily, one of the practices that I use to get out of my monkey mind and into my body when it comes to decision making and when it comes to taking action is actually just going on walks and noticing which way my body wants to go whenever I get to a fork in the road, and then just following that way. There's a funny story of doing this when I first arrived in San Diego. I was doing this with a friend, and we would just get to a stop sign. I think it's this way. All right, cool. Like, and we had no idea where we're going, right? And we're just walking, and each stop sign just taking a left, taking a right. And we ended up at the beach and stumbled upon a silent disco that was taking place on the beach. And we ended up like dancing on the beach till 4 a.m. And it was like, oh my God, there's something happening here where my body has more knowledge about this than I do. And like, I sometimes like to imagine myself as an animal pre-language. Like, what would I be doing? Like, how does a horse know where to wander in nature? I'm like, okay, what if I'm just that? And so I put myself in places, and I'll even do it when I'm driving in my car sometimes. And I have never not ended up somewhere wildly fascinating. Like just a series of rights, lefts, straights, and end up in really cool places. And often I'll just write and kind of reflect on being there and just enjoying that process. But it puts me in a place where I'm making decisions with my body and not so much as with my mind.
I love that because, yeah, no, I don't know. If we're in our head too much, we can get so lost in it. But to take ourselves out of that and in something so simple like just a walk, to know that your body kind of knows more than you do at times when you just kind of trust that is, I think, a really beautiful practice, but easy to start in. And then to notice that in kind of all the different areas of your life. So I love that. And I've practiced them myself and I've found different things too where I just come upon something I never knew, but I wouldn't have got there if I was logically thinking about it or straining to try to figure out a reason why I was there, kind of thing.
Mm, absolutely. Yeah, it's very, very fun when you start tapping into that. And start teaching your body that it's safe to let go of one's attachment to overthinking.
Mm,
And once that type of relationship with your own thoughts is built, or once the foundation is laid, you can expand on that. And I used to be someone who overthink or overthought or overthinked.
yeah.
Not sure the past tense of that. Um, I used to overthink very frequently, and I'll share another point because it's been so helpful for me with that, which is that, or two other points, which is one, that you can't think your way out of confusion.
Mm,
Um, that one really got me. That one really got me. It was like, oh my God, I am actually trying to think my way out of this. When in reality, I am just on the hamster wheel of thought and I'm not going anywhere. And then hearing that the best use of thinking is in service of others, those two things pretty much helped me go cold turkey on overthinking and just pretty much stop doing it anymore, along with the practice of just exploring my body. Like, um, I, I almost, if I find myself thinking now, it's like, oh, that's funny. I haven't done this in months. It is, which is a really delightful experience. I can promise you that.
yeah. Can you explain more on the second one? Overthinking is only beneficial in service of others. Is that how you worded that?
Yeah. Well, really thinking like the mind, we often um, are using our mind to try and keep ourselves safe
Mm,
and do things that serve us, which there's nothing wrong with that. I lean on my body for those types of things, and I use my thoughts to create in service of others. And that's where thoughts are most valuable. This is a concept that came from Julian, as he does a lot of work with human design, and
yeah.
was part of that like original human design, like learned from the creators of it basically. And
Yeah.
his philosophy when it comes to thinking is exactly that, where it's thinking is really only useful in service of others, and
Mm,
using the body for making decisions, and yeah, using not just basically, I noticed this happening. I was in a meditation retreat, just recently, and the we all had a chance to share, and the facilitator said something really interesting. He was like, I invite us all to listen when it's our time to listen. A lot of times we'll be listening, like thinking about what we're going to say when it's our turn to share. And
yeah.
I invite you to just listen. And then when it's your turn to just speak from the heart. And it was such a challenging thing, in that, like, at least 9 to 17 times during this event where people were going around talking, I noticed myself trying to figure out what I was going to say. And it was like, that was the exact type of thing to just practice returning to. Oh, I can just let that thought go. I can just, what one of my clients said recently, I can just press skip on that thought and just return right back to the present and return
Mm,
back to my listening.
yeah. It has to bring a lot of trust because I've found that for myself of like, well, if I want to remember this, I have to keep thinking of it, but it's not having you be present and kind of trusting that if it's meant to come out, it will when you go to share from your heart. But yeah, that's a hard one to be able to bring yourself back to over and over. So that's nice that they were able to bring that up in a meditation thing to just like, I don't know, really focus on. Because then you hear people completely different if you're not adding your own thoughts to it.
The whole thing, yeah, it is. I don't know if I even have a good response to what to do about the fear of losing a good thought. Um, like I don't know what to make of it. I don't have a good answer. What I can tell you is that um, being in a place where I was listening and was present, and what I ended up saying myself, I ended up being really happy with and really pleased with, and
Mm-hmm.
it felt really genuine and really um, complete without me having to do all the work that I was previously doing. And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
Which is,
it's
yeah,
definitely some, yeah,
such a gift, though, to be able to still have value come from not our logical mind, and when you just kind of let it rest to come from the heart kind of thing. I'm curious, when you were going through that period of like from where you were to actually having a coach, what was, or I guess, okay, so I see things as like we are our best healer, our best coach, our best guide. Nobody knows what's better for us than ourselves. But then at the same time, I've had that where that's almost like not the best thought because it's brought me to where I can be either lonely or like I can only rely on me. At what point
mm,
do you feel that there's that side of it, and then also we can do our best by having a coach? Because obviously that was such a catapult in your life of like where you were thinking and then getting a coach, not necessarily seeming like he's outsourcing your power to him, but putting the power back in you. And where, I guess, where is there kind of that balance, if that makes sense? Kind of a long-winded question.
yeah, no, I love it, right? Because I think if anyone is finding themselves in a relationship with a coach or therapist where they are giving their power away, um, I would reconsider that relationship dynamic, because what I find the space most valuable for is to find the truth, to help uncover the truth that is within me that I'm just simply not able to access as well as I would like to on my own. And
Mm,
so that is how I view my role as a coach, and how I view my role as a person who is being coached at the same
mm-hmm,
time. Is it's still me out here living the life. Like I'm very familiar with, I grew up playing a ton of sports. Coach, not on the field, but a good coach can see what's happening on the field, can identify what you can't see,
mm,
or can ask you the questions that help you be able to see what you're seeing in a way that's then useful, where you can say, oh yeah, that is happening, where the other team is doing this with these things, and so if we put this over here, does that seem like a good plan? And the coach can be like, yes, and what do you think about this? Oh yeah, that might actually even be better.
mm,
So it's really a space of collaboration, um, more so than it is like, hey, I'm playing this game and it's not working. Like, can you just like show me how to do it? Like, that's that is not a dynamic I think that will be sustainable and will be really beneficial. And I'll share a quote that I heard this last weekend, because one of the themes for me is I one of the themes lately in my own personal growth is around asking for help, and
mm-hmm,
being a masculine male who's like got things figured out. It's often quite challenging for me to ask for help. And someone shared something this weekend. They said, if you feel like you can't hold it all together, it's because we're meant to hold it all together. And
mm,
that the idea that, as I shared things like we mentioned, like I just got engaged, and I was um, at this ceremony, and I was like, I'm going to do it on Monday, but I don't know. Do I need? I like noticed myself going into this thing of like, do I have the right things, and am I going to do it the right way, and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, I can just share my plans with people and allow them to contribute. And what
mm,
was so wild was like people were just so excited. Oh, you could ask this person to do this, or you can do it this way, or bring this, and like within a matter of moments, like the whole thing was just so much easier. And I was like, oh my god, this is like such a delight to share intention and share like challenge that I'm facing with community, and that it doesn't have to be on my own. And I think like I've learned to put myself in isolation and figure things out on my own and sort of like torture myself in a lot of ways. And I'm looking forward to this chapter. I'll tell you that the early pages have been quite nice, and looking forward to what's next.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that point because that is something I feel like I've been more drawn to speaking on, just seeing it, whether it's men I know, been raised by, friends with, that kind of, that like macho masculine that feels like it needs to be portrayed, or even that quote of like, men live lives of silent desperation. And it's like
Mm.
not being able to ask for help, not feeling like all these things, yet at the same time, once it's done, you realize there's so much power within it, and you can become a better man because of it, because you just actually put down the thoughts of what you had around it versus what it really means to actually ask for help. It doesn't mean weakness. It means you want to do the best that you can do, and support would help you in that. Like, I think it's such a powerful point. So I'm so glad you brought that up, but at the same time, or doing that yourself and realizing that, like, man, that's a powerful journey, because I know the way you're going to be able to share that is just going to like ripple through. And I think it's such a needed message at this time.
I really agree, and a message that like I didn't hear, or I didn't even know was safe. And I do think there's a fine line. I think it is important to like have the ability to hold intention and hold through challenging times and maintain like that grounded sense of I am going to figure this out,
Mm-hmm.
and that asking for help is still being driven by me. It's like it's still me doing it. I'm just using I happen to be using support as like one of the ways that I'm like quote unquote doing it on my own. That's how I figured out how to kind of make it still me without being like, hey, coach, you play the game for me. Hey, helper, do everything for me, which I don't think works really that well either. And what gets to be the thing that I use to kind of determine whether or not it's working are the outcomes that I actually create. And I like the way that you said that, where it's like, at the end of the day, what I'm seeking to do is create experiential outcomes in my own emotional state, and external outcomes in the types of results and the types of things that get created in the world as a result of my intention and my will and my direction. And what we get to look at as men is like, okay, if I sit there and I guess really anyone, if I'm in a cave, thinking about what it is I want to create and do, what type of result does that create versus, okay, I'm going to speak about this in a way that gets people inspired. I'm going to ask for help. I'm going to ask for support. What type of result does that create? I've been much more interested in the latter in terms of my ability to create, than ever before, like which was more trying to quote unquote do it on my own.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Like, just all of that. There's so much value in all of that by being able to, yeah, do it on your own, but at the same time not realize that it takes away, because that's been something I've struggled with. Like, when other people help me, then is it really me doing that? But that idea that it is, because I'm directing it, and I'm not like, hey, do this for me. So even that's such a powerful thing for me to hear, because I've struggled with trying to see where collaboration or asking for help or support and being like, hey, I can't hold it all on my own, doesn't take away the feeling that, like, that feeling we can be like, when I did it myself, that feels really good. But when we can outsource that, when we ask for help and feel like our value is diminished because of it, and that's actually not the case depending how it's done, which I think is such a good distinction in that, because it can be kind of a slippery slope in some ways by just outsourcing it or being like, hey, this is me and I'm guiding the support for something better on the outcome. So you're speaking to me with that one totally.
I love it. Yeah, I love that reflection so much.
And so I'm curious, we've talked about relationships briefly, but at the same time, I think in the last conversation we had, you have such a beautiful perspective I found on relationships, and not just relationships, but in relating to things around us. You said everything is a relationship, how you relate to it. And that kind of connected the dots for me because on your page it's flow coach, which is awesome. I was like, okay, I love the idea of that. But you speak very much on relationships, which I also was like, I love that. And when you explained everything in life is a relation to itself, whether it's relating to how we feel about something, relating to others. And I think that is just such a beautiful way of seeing it. So I'd love for you to just dive in with whatever you feel like from there. And then I actually want to get into your relationship that you have now and some realizations you've had with that. But in your idea of relating to things just in a general sense, what is your, I'd love for you to explain that perspective because you dove into it on our chat, but I found so much value in that that I know others will too.
I love that so much. Yeah, it is such a beautiful thing to navigate life being interested in relationship and sort of seeing everything as a relationship. Um, my friend mentor Julian, who I've spoken about, has a saying where he says, "All that matters is between people." And if you really were to pry, he would tell you that all that matters is what's communicated between things. All that's mattered is the relation between any things. It just so happens that humans are more egocentric. Um, and so that's like the relationship between water and sand on the beach. It's the relationship between air and your skin. It's the relationship between you and your thoughts, you and your emotions, you and your dreams, you and the things that you're building, you and your partner, and learning to relate to these things, like relate to all of them in a flow based way, um, has really changed my life. And it is like this sort of fundamental principle to remove that which doesn't serve us and in those dynamics. The sort of things that we do when it appears things aren't going our way,
Mm.
those are the things that stop relationship from happening, and where it starts to become something where we're requiring something in our environment to change in order for us to be happy. And it's not a very effective way of navigating this intensely complicated field of relationship where everything is sort of related and connected to one another, going around being like, you better change, here are my needs, here my perspective, you better change, um, otherwise I'm going to be not happy. Like, that is not a very effective thing to put into the field, the sort of like quantum field. It doesn't really work. The way that the whole system ends up responding to that is typically the opposite of what you're actually looking for. And I'm sure a lot of us can relate to the experience of like, why does my partner always do this? And then like they do more of it. And, like that type of process, it's like, when I look at it in myself, I notice that more often than not, it's my own resistance to the way things are that makes things worse, versus trying to find acceptance and compassion and the space for things to exist in their exact existence, in their exact presence, exactly as they are, and to be okay and loving towards that. That's been a process where the most unimaginable beauty has been created as a result of me putting myself in that place without requiring anyone else to change.
Yeah. Seeing it as I don't know. It's scary because then it's kind of all on you, but at the same time really empowering because it's all on you. And that's the
You.
one thing, yourself, which I guess then has been a huge part in your relationship you're at right now. So, in the relationship you're at right now, do you think there's been a lot more, or I guess, do you think you found the relationship you're in now because of your way of relating to things differently? Like, do you think if you weren't seeing the way you relate as such a big thing, that maybe your relationship could feel differently than it is with that perspective?
100%. I remember, in the time where I was single after this long-term relationship, what I became very, very interested in was my own energetic state. And I sort of considered myself to be the navigator, the like, you know, 1400s like ship explorer navigator of my own experience. And so I'm like steering this ship around into different environments, into different places, and observing my own reactions and my own the like what that did for me internally. And it was really fun. I noticed like, wow, that's a person that I look at and my like ego says that person is sexy or that person's hot and like that is like a thing that I want over there. And then I would steer my ship over there and be like, whoa, my internal experience is not really enjoying this. Like it feels actually more draining than if I were just being by myself, like in nature. And so I got to explore that process. And then one day I came across Emily, and it was like we could just be sitting there doing absolutely nothing. And I felt like the most incredible person on planet Earth. And
Mm.
I didn't I didn't even really think or care about her at all. I only really cared about myself in the most like loving way because I would be like, it feels so good to be around you. Like, what do I get to add to this dynamic so that it keeps going? And I would just say like, I feel so good around you. I want to be around you more. And she's like, okay, I really like being around you too. It feels good being around you too. Like, let's do it more. And it just became a thing where it felt like I was a version of myself that was my favorite version of myself by an order of magnitude that was so much higher than anything else I'd ever experienced. It was just like I would just like to keep spending time with you. I don't care about what you're doing. I don't care about what TV shows you like. I don't care about what music you like. I just want to be around you. And obviously, it's turned out that like we're very compatible in the way that we view life and the things that we're looking for. But I don't think that I would have found because she doesn't like I think of her as the most beautiful woman in the world, but she doesn't look like the version that my ego thought that I wanted. Um, it's been a very interesting thing, like to just watch that whole process. Like I don't know what would have happened if I weren't so focused on this, but I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't be here.
Yeah. Having that kind of inner guide versus the logical one again of like, we think we'll figure it out this way and by following our mind, but when we use the body, it can guide us to things that are so much deeper on like a realm that doesn't really make sense. But at the same time, we've talked about it briefly, and it was actually, I think, in some of your recent content of like, even though you're in a good relationship, doesn't mean there's still not triggers, which I think
Oh
is a
god.
big thing because I found in my relationship, my partner triggers me the most because they're the biggest mirror for me. And I'm interested in growing, so I can see that as like, hey, where is this a me thing that he's kind of showing me? So I'd love for you to kind of differentiate what would be an area where like a trigger would come up and you're like, okay, I need to look at this and this is me? Or it's actually like a problem in the relationship kind of thing? Because I know you've got a lot of controversial stuff on your, or a lot of people feeling like there's a lot of different, like, this isn't right. But I, on my end, completely agree with you that any trigger can, I don't know, not being triggered doesn't, I guess, result in evolution or growth of ourself if we're always just like feeling good to go. People are probably people pleasing or bypassing things. So, what are ways, I guess, in your relationship you found that maybe you've been triggered, but you've seen it as a way of relating to it to benefit you in the relationship instead of like, this is a red flag kind of thing?
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, it is so fun. And this is another way of looking at things that I don't know if I would have had necessarily without this approach, but getting to think this way and um, getting to see the results of it, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm sold. Because yeah, you're right. I mean, it has been the single most challenging. It may be the single most challenging thing that I've ever done in my life. Definitely most challenging relationship, and definitely being confronted with some of the worst of my own behavior, like behavior that I'm truly not proud of, and behavior where I'm like, holy, like how did we get to this point? Like how did I get here? How did I lose myself so much in this? And I heard this quote recently that was like, you're not healed. You're not as healed as you think you are. You're just not surrounded by people who can trigger you, or something like that. I was like, kind of chuckled, because there's something when you can, like, for me personally, like, I mean, I feel like I was triggered yesterday or even this morning. Like, who knows? Who knows? It's quite a common occurrence, and what I've done a better job at is reducing the time to recognize that I'm operating from my programming, that I'm operating out of a reactionary place and not a responsive place. And
Mm.
the place that I typically go from there now is laughter. And we've sort of implemented like a hug and laughter moment, of like when we both start noticing ourselves going into a place of, this isn't really how I want to be showing up here. Am I, is this the, would I like to make a reel of this behavior right now? Is this really where we want to be at? And in those moments, like, choose the thing that we've sort of chosen is like a hug and laughter, and getting to relish in the joys of being human, relish in the joys of recognizing that we are just so far from perfect. And there's like a sense of humility and a sense of appreciation for just being alive, for getting to do this dance with one another, that I think has been the most important thing for us. I'll give some more concrete examples of what this might look like. And this was like a year and a half ago or a year ago or so. And I love playing tennis, and I would go play tennis, and I go play tennis for hours, sometimes like several hours, because my body's in good shape. I'm like taking care of myself. I'm playing really good tennis. Like, I'm just learning the game and doing really well. And like, it's just like a really positive experience for me. And then I get home and it's like, hey, you're like late for dinner. Like, where have you been? You haven't had your phone on you. And I kind of have this approach like, hey, you be responsible for you. I'll be responsible for me. Like, come on. Like, I would never blame you for like being late for dinner. I would just eat dinner and like figure it out. And, this sort of thing would happen fairly regularly. And then it started turning into like, you don't care about me. You're really selfish. And it started to be like, I started to realize that what I was asking for her to do, which was to like be quote unquote accountable for her experience, was something that I was not doing, by the fact that my experience, my choices were generating this reaction from her. And when I started seeing it that way, as like, yeah, you can go play tennis all you want, but if you get home and your partner is like hurt and sad, it doesn't matter whose fault that is. It doesn't matter that she's not good enough at doing her emotional journey and her self-soothing. Like, blaming her isn't going to do shit. It's really not. And so getting to look at like, oh wow, it's my behavior that's creating this experience. And all of the stuff that I was feeling, which is like typically more avoidant attachment type behavior, all that stuff that I was feeling about like, I'm losing who I am, I'm like being whipped, I'm being demasculinated or emasculated, and um like that I'm doing all of this stuff, that was all choices that I got to move through, all stuff that I got to move through, where I could look at like, okay, no one can take away my masculinity but myself. No one can really ever make me do something. And all of this stuff all of this is just choices. It's choices and experiences. And so that was an example of something where I then like started choosing different things, like choosing to come home a lot earlier from tennis, or not even go sometimes, and like make dinner for her so that she could be studying. She's in medical school, and like, there's just um, a lot of things like that have been like gut wrenching. And someone might be listening and be like, "What is this guy's problem? Like, what's his thing?" Right? But we all have our own, you know, um, sort of trauma. We all have our own baggage that it seems like we bring into these relationships that we get to work through. And I just find myself very appreciative at the opportunity to keep doing the dance with her. And I keep a recognition that there's nothing, even if we get married, there's nothing like existentially or like spiritually that requires that she keeps showing up for me. There may be some legal documentation, but as I'm sure half of America already knows, that doesn't really mean that much. And so I try and have this attitude where I try and be responsible for myself. I try and be responsible for whatever it is that's coming to me, even if it seems like it's actually coming from her. And those have been the areas of my biggest growth. And that's the type of thing that I speak about. And it's also why people find it so controversial, because they want it to be that their partner can change. They want someone to agree with them and say, yeah, you're so right. Your partner's so toxic and they're terrible. And like, they need to change. And then there are some people that are like, oh, I hear you, man. I can see myself in that. Okay. I'm signing up for this. Let's do it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. What a gift it is to, I don't know, just the whole perspective of like it can be in our, it's the way that we relate because you can see it as her, but then you're going to attach labels to how she is. You're going to feel certain things and it makes you feel powerless. But when you have that perspective to be like, hey, it may seem like she's reacting, but what is my responsibility in this? It's like, oh, that's like, that such a core point of like what is my responsibility in everything. And if you see it as that, sometimes your responsibility then is to leave, have different boundaries, or maybe it's to be more compassionate, or where can I do something different that is not going to make me less masculine but at the same time actually considerate of my partner. Or when we go to that responsibility that we have, then our life is in our creation instead of completely outside of us and seeing it as a problem, which I think is like so beautiful to be able to capture in a relationship, because then it evolves from there. And it's always exciting because I don't know, you can move through things differently instead of always having to be the same person with the same issues, which I think is such a beautiful thing that you guys have found in your relationship. Is there's going to be evolution as long as you guys are continuing to take responsibility for yourself. And then that keeps it exciting, that keeps it interesting, that keeps it, there's growth, there's so much there. So yeah, really appreciate you sharing just that insight and how you've navigated that in your relationship. I think is awesome.
yeah, it's you said something there about like being responsible, and what is fairly bold to say. Um, and I'm mostly convinced that it's true. I'm not sure though. Um, is that it really only requires one person to actually be responsible. Um, that if you're being fully responsible and taking full ownership, that everything that you're experiencing then is part of your creation. And like I said, I'm not sure that it's true. I feel pretty good that it's true, but I'm like, I recognize that it's quite a bold statement. Um, and it's not to discount the work that Emily does as well, because I know she's on her own journey. But the place that I feel that I have to go in my own psyche is anything bad that's happening that I'm experiencing, I'm either creating myself, I'm attracting myself
Mm.
to, um, or like causing basically. And if I keep looking at it that way, then there's zero amount that I need from her in the way that she needs to change or do anything different or have any other different experience other than what she's having.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I feel so much resonance with that cuz then I don't know, kind of like the idea of flow, if it can always be our like individual responsibility, it leaves a flow instead of feeling like you're stuck at the whim of someone else's reaction or how they're feeling. And it seems like it kind of keeps that able to move, because then if it's always someone else, you just got to stay and deal with it instead of what can I do differently, how can I show up differently. And yeah, I don't know, it all ties back into like the way you see things, of just a flow in things, which I think is so beautiful, because if you see it as that, there's not really too many things that are actually this like halt in the road, you're stuck, nothing you can do. There's always something that you can do, or something you can see as different. So I think that's, yeah, I think that's
Which is yeah,
so beautiful.
which is exactly how I would prefer to see the world. It's these things aren't true. They're not like universal truths that need to be followed and argued for their truth. They're like suits to try on that make you look good and feel good. And
Yeah,
yeah,
and if it works for you, then keep doing it, and obviously it has been, and you've had a lot of success in it, and other people find that value in that as well, of like, we're kind of in control, we can create difference. So yeah, I absolutely love that. And I'm super excited to see kind of your guys' journey together, because already just seeing the way you navigate it, but the honesty to also be able to be like, I still get triggered. Here's how I'm still showing up in ways that ideally aren't like the best way, but is still very much true, very much human. And we can't not show up in those ways and just try to push it in a closet. It is the experience, but then adding like the tangible, like, it's real, here's how you can move through it, though, is such a awesome way, instead of just acting as if they're not there and very not real. Because I think if we can imagine relationships as like, there's never a problem, it's good, there's never ups and downs, that's absolutely not the truth. And I found in my relationship, wondering that, I'm like, where are people talking about how they actually navigate these very real human feelings, that usually people would just say then it's not your person, or you feel so great and everything makes it be your person. I'm like, that's not true. There is so much more to that, if you want to do relationships in a more conscious way, where like there is growth and evolution and change and so much. So I'm glad you're spreading that message through your experience.
forgiveness and compassion go a really really long way. They really do.
Yes.
It is like and it's such a gift to be able to do that dance with someone who's willing to do it with you, and to extend you the forgiveness, in your darkest times, and to really like forgive fully. And that is a really beautiful thing, and something that I really appreciate about Emily. She forgives. She's a very intense person, and there are moments, but but when things happen, she is able to forgive and start fresh and release resentment and release grudges and just return back to like, okay, everything that happened is just something that happened. And here we are right now in this moment. What do we want to do? Like, let's love each
Mm.
other. let's let's love. Let's do that. That sounds fun. Let's do that.
Yeah. So I'm curious the advice you would have because it doesn't seem, or it seems like just in the theme of, say, feminine and masculine, that it is a more feminine thing to be interested in diving into ourselves, wanting to know more about ourselves and who we are. And that doesn't seem as much a very masculine trait. So I find within society, it's very, I don't know, we're wanting men to be different and expecting it to come in a feminine way. Yet for men that feel just like put off by looking inwards, words like flow or spirituality in any way, I guess, did you feel that yourself at all? And what was, and if you did, what was that point where you kind of were able to like change your perspective and open your mind that maybe this isn't all crazy? Maybe there is some value for me here and not just to leave it for, I don't know, because it seems like very much a feminine thing to do those things. Like, where were you able to adopt that for yourself without having resistance against it? Or did you ever have resistance against looking inwards and kind of seeking that for yourself?
What a great question. I'm thinking back to my early spirituality, um, which I believe came around the time when I was like 18 or so, and stumbled upon um, some. I had some experiences that allowed me to see that everything that I had told, or everything that I had been told, didn't appear to be as true as it was being made to seem. And like, I started doing yoga, and I've never in my entire life been able to touch my toes. And then it was like, whoa, I can touch my toes. Like, I've stretched a lot before, but this is like different, right? And I'm like, okay, wait, so my body isn't as fixed as I thought. And then I'm noticing that my mind isn't as fixed as I thought. I'm not like I used to. I'm not this way or that way. I'm sort of like whatever way I choose to be. And then it started becoming like, well, I like money, and I like, being a single guy, and like having experiences with women. Like, that's a fun thing too. And so a lot of my early spirituality was like, whoa, I can live a different life than what I was told is possible. So I feel like for me, it's always been spirituality has been rooted in like some element of practicality. Um, and so
Yeah.
it's almost felt like I don't want to say like a weapon, but like it's been a something that it's a tool for me. It's not something that I just do in and of myself, which may be more of a feminine process. That being said, I'm also someone in general, like, I mean, flow is a very feminine sort of surrendering type activity. I love surfing, which has a lot of feminine qualities. Um, I am very creative and like artistic, and also very feminine quality. So I do feel like I'm also tapped into my feminine side. Um, I think for men out there who are, I think my sense is we have this resistance and towards men that are doing what they're doing because we want it to look a certain way. We want them to be more interested in what we're interested in, and we're subtly
Mm-hmm.
blaming them for not doing it, and then we're labeling and we're judging them because it's like, oh wow, he must just be scared to go there. Maybe he's like afraid of what he's going to find, and we like layer on all of our own stuff. And to me, I think the real answer is like with the men in our lives who appear to be not quote unquote spiritual, is how can we bring curiosity to what they're doing? What's going on? What are they thinking? What are they not thinking? What's happening for them? And just getting to be curious and playful and light about whatever experience they're having without making assumptions as to whether or not it's spiritual because they're spending all day at an ashram, and that sort
Yeah.
of I think about like with my dad. Like I used to think this about my dad. I used to think like, oh, dad, if you could only understand like spiritual stuff. And it was coming from this place of like, you're not okay as you are. And it's like, how
Mhm.
spiritual am I? How evolved am I if I can't accept someone as they are? And it took me 10 years to learn that. And finally, I called my dad and told him that I just love him as he is and I'm interested in knowing who he is. And he said that he felt like he could die tomorrow. And I, since that moment, talked to my dad like an hour and a half a week. And this was after 10 years of not talking at all. And we laugh endlessly, talk, like make jokes, talk about sports, whatever. And then every once in a while, he'll tell me like the craziest stories from his childhood and, what it was like to be in this situation or that situation and the things that he got himself into and the decisions that he made and like the regrets that he had. And it's like, oh yeah, this was there all along. Um, these are things that he's considering all along. It's just he just doesn't feel like the need to discuss it all the time, but it's there, and it's just been the most beautiful thing to get to understand my dad that way. And I think we all have a chance to look at the men in our lives in that way.
And yeah, the more curiosity part. I I love that you say that because it is easy to be like, I need you to do this, and because you're not doing it in the way I am, it's not right. And that is where we really get to look at ourselves and be like, yeah, how spiritual am I if I'm actually just saying, like, you need to be different than you are? I see spirituality as like acceptance of who I am, of who you are. But it's easy to be lost within thinking that it should look a certain way. But when you do accept it differently, yeah, like that's such a beautiful story you have with your dad and experience that like that relationship was there all along, but it was you relating to it differently that can open that. So thank you for sharing your perspective on that. Like I got so much value in that, and I definitely have navigated that myself of certain times with my partner. I'm like, why aren't you doing it this way? And then I realize he is totally in tune with certain things, but not in the way I visually do when I sit down and do some just like witchy girl shit and have cards and stuff. But his way of doing that just looks different. But it is beautiful when you can accept that for as it is and then kind of just journey together in a different way than you have. So yeah, I'm so glad you kind of shared that and have experienced that in such a true way with your dad. I think that's awesome.
It is awesome. It is awesome. And I love that reflection too, with your in your own experience with your partner, and just like, yep, been there. It's all we can do. It seems is laugh and move ourselves back. Just all right. I'm back. I'm back here. I'm back. I'm gonna try again. You know, and there's
Yeah.
something very lovely about that.
Yes, when you
Please.
say daily that it seems like kind of ways that you do it that may look completely different than how say I do it kind of thing. What are those for you?
Yeah, good question. I can answer this on a couple different timelines. One is I have my own journaling practice that helps me just sort of like get things out of my head and onto paper, and sort of like
Mm-hmm.
make sure that there's nothing in there that like feels like it needs to be out and in somewhere. Making content for me is actually a real kind of spiritual practice for me at this point. It's often I find myself making videos where it's like I'm answering the question that I'm asking or that I asked, or that I didn't know that I was asking, but was asking. Like years ago or last week, even, or this morning even. And so, yeah, so that is a practice. Um, Also having a coach, I meet with him every other week, often more frequently than that, to help see what I can't see about my own, what's happening for me, what's happening in my language, what's happening in my choices, like how my subconscious is navigating new environments. Um, and the final thing that, and we spoke about this, is how I come back home is through plant medicine ceremonies, whether that's psilocybin or more recently ayahuasca. Those ceremonies and that sort of exploration has almost been like, um, a, a thing that helps put everything in perspective. It's almost like I understand the truth of, um, what my coach Julian was talking about or has been talking about for 6 months. I realized, like, wow, he's just putting into words something that I feel in my body right now. But like I'm experiencing the
Mm,
truth of it right now. And there I find that those adventures and those sits can be really challenging, and can actually pack a lot of challenge into a very short period of time. I've heard, like, you know, you want to fast forward 10 years of therapy, just, sit with ayahuasca for a weekend. And that's what's been true for me. I come away and, like, I have this sense of, like, holy cow, even where I thought I was doing this, I could still see so much more about how far off I still am. And it's like, oh my God. And that type of awareness that comes with that is very loving. It's very playful. It's very light. It's not like, oh, you're a bad person. It's a very light experience for me, where I get to see the gap. And like with ayahuasca, it's like me and Mother Ayahuasca have a little laugh about that, and then we sort of move on, and like, okay, here's another thing, and like, and so those sort of practices, all in conjunction with one another, are the things, are sort of my medicine, if you will. They help me, um, stay grounded, stay in myself, stay in my purpose, um, and stay in a place where I'm creating and responding rather than reacting, blaming, shaming, resenting.
a lot more, like everything kind of just probably it seems like it's such a big thing now that people will just go and want that to be the solution, and it's very much, it's not the solution, but it's a piece in the puzzle that if you integrate can really help you. So what are those ways for you to integrate after you do ceremonies like that and kind of sit with the medicine?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the messages are. Um,
Mm.
it depends on what the messages are, and I think the foundational aspect is like create is are creating the systems for living what I would call like a high performance life. So that's things like having a really well defined calendar system, having a really defined, well defined task management system, whether that's journaling, whatever it is, like the sort of practices that you have in your life that allow the seeds of the downloads that come in these environments to be nurtured and to grow and to be healthy and to be integrated. So in a lot of ways, like the way that I have set up my life, it sort of gets taken care of, um,
Mm.
just based on the things that I already have in place. Um, and then some of the things I ask for guidance on from the plants, from the sort of like beings or energies or whatever it is that we're sort of tuning into in those experiences. Like for example, my about a year, like year plus ago, maybe 13 months ago, I sat with ayahuasca for the first time, and from that time I haven't consumed any alcohol, which was like the first time for me, like after basically having like a couple drinks every day. um, and so though that was just a matter of listening, and like sort of asking for help, like, hey, as I'm getting this download, like, hey, you're killing your body, like, don't, like, life, you're actually, yeah, you're killing your body, but you're actually like missing out on life. Like I know you think you're numbing yourself, but whatever it is that you're running from is actually way, way, way more interesting than the numbing. And so like I asked for help, and it would basically, what that ended up looking like was like, I'd be like, yeah, I'd love to drink, but I can't figure out a type of alcohol that I'll actually like. And I would just be like, go to the store and be like, huh, not wine, not this, not that. I'm like, I guess there's nothing I can drink. Like I just didn't like it anymore. So I got some sort of like help with that particular part of the integration. And yeah, a lot of the things like it's it just depends on what the sort of download is. Um, that sort of depends on how it ends up getting integrated for me at least.
List kind of thing. So the that answer from it that just doesn't quite resonate once you're out of it, which I'm sure that's for lots of it. That is lots of it too. So yeah, thank you for
I'll
sharing on
say
that. Sorry.
I'll add one other piece to this, which I think is actually really important. Is I only aim to integrate like as particular, especially when I first started, like I would I would be shown this like entire new life, like oh my god, healthy, this, that, the other thing, like whatever it is, I'd be shown it and like oh I'm gonna do this now, I'm gonna call these people, I'm gonna talk to this person every day, and oh my god, I'm gonna do all this stuff, and like my aim is like if I can aim for to integrate 10% of this, if I can aim to integrate 20% of this, maybe 30, maybe 5, my life will still be better for it. So I gave myself
Yeah.
the grace of not integrating everything. And I think that's really important because like sometimes we can do things where we're like, oh my God, I'm gonna like start this morning routine and it's gonna be 7 hours long. And like, oh, I'm gonna do it. Okay. And like I do this new morning routine for 1.5 days and then it's like gone and I don't do anything. So like giving my space to do just the one thing of the morning routine and like everything else is okay. And like that'll come. It's all good. It's more important to go a little bit forward than to go a lot of bit forward and then stop. Um, so, I can sort of compound the interest of the growth versus like try and make these massive leaps.
Yeah, make it easy for yourself instead of some big thing. The micro moments. Yeah, I'm glad you added that because I find that's a huge thing even for myself as a reminder at times of like it doesn't need to all change tomorrow. I could change a small part of it. So
Right?
yeah.
Yes.
Well, I have, I guess, one or two last questions. I'm curious, what is a book or podcast that has been like a huge factor in your life or personal development or growth or whatever part of it? A book or a podcast or both, if you enjoy
Hmm.
both, that have been transformational for you.
I've really enjoyed the Tim Ferriss show. That was like always something that I listened to. I've not really been an active podcast listener over the last handful of years, um, simply because I in the vein that we were discussing earlier around like overthinking, I found myself wanting to reduce the amount of information and wanting to focus on one thing at a time and not have FOMO about like what quote I was going to be following or like what sort of energy, like oh that I'm going to change everything to align myself with that concept or that idea, and giving myself the space to kind of like be dumb in a spiritual sense, like dumb it down. Like just okay, I'm
Mm.
just gonna do my thing for 6 months here. And then a book that I really love is The Alchemist. I
Mm.
read that book actually sort of later in my spiritual journey, and was like, holy cow, how does this how what is this? Like, how do they, how, what? Like, this is so cool. Um, like, this is it. This is how all this stuff works. This is like what's going on. Like, all that stuff that he does with his mind and the winds and all that. Like, I just was like, oh, yeah, like, this is inside of us. Um, and there's a little bit of slice of magic in that book. And magic is an energy, and mystery is an energy that I really enjoy cultivating in my life. It's not an energy that is, they're not teaching that in elementary school. I'll tell you that. But recognizing that it's
Mm-hmm.
available to us and something that we can cultivate is something that I really enjoy. And I saw in that book and was like, how do so many people have read this book, but like the world's is what it is. It's just like, wow, this is so cool.
Yeah. I've heard so much about that book, but I have yet to read it myself. But yeah,
Oh, you got to
very
read it. Yeah,
curious.
it's so
What are
good.
ways I guess you adopt magic in your life? What is a little way that you try to do that or bring in
You
the
know,
energy of magic?
um, I think that so much of our experience is dictated by the thoughts that we have. And it's very rare that we are actually consciously choosing our thoughts. And what I try to do is, if I am going to be thinking things, which I try not to be in general, they're going to be specific to an experience that I want to have. Like thoughts that I used to have 10,000 times a day would be like, what do they think of me? Or am I going to run out of money? Or, what if this happens? Or, and what I aim for now are thoughts that are more affirming, like magic shows up in beautiful and surprising ways in my life, doesn't it? And I'll just sort of look around, and I'll invite the recognition that in the magic that is already around me. And it's what I just find that I'll do that, and then a special bird flies right in front of me. And I'm just like, what's going on here? This is incredible. I love this so much. Thank you, universe. Thank you, God. Whoever is out, like, what? This is so cool. And, I just sort of try to create moments like that during my day, and with Emily and with friends. And I try and have that be the type of thing that I speak about versus, oh, just stressed out. Just, it's like, it's so sacred what we allow to come
Mm-hmm.
out, like the vibration of what comes out of our mouth. And so the practice for me is really just around recognition and sort of calling it forth in a almost disciplined kind of manner and regular manner.
I love how you make things so, I guess, is realistic the word? It's not way up here and hard to grasp. It's very tangible. It's very relatable and brings like, I don't know. I love the way that you're able to do that because it is something that can seem like, oh, there's magic around us, or there's, if you focus on that there's magic around you, you will notice the magic that is around. It's just the way you approach it is very relatable, I feel, to so many. So I love when you say things and it's like, oh, so simple, but like it could be, yes, so not simple. I
Uh,
appreciate the way you convey and see things, which I'm sure
oh
just, I don't know, makes it easier to approach when it's like tangible and kind of structured in the way that you approach things. So that's awesome.
I
I guess
appreciate that.
my last question my last question is kind of a big one, but I'm curious, what is the driving force, Jason, behind your constant pursuit of personal development?
What I think that I constantly am pursuing more so than developing myself, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
is developing experiences, developing experiential
Mm-hmm.
states, developing, giving people the tools to live a better life today than they lived yesterday. And I do so selfishly because I want to run into that person at the grocery store. I want to do business with that person. I want that person's artwork to live in this world. I want that person's creative project to live in this world. And so very selfishly, I try and give away as much value as I possibly can about the things that have been useful or valuable for me, simply because that's the world that I want to live in. I want to live in a world where people feel a greater sense of self-worth. Self-worth has been something I've struggled with. Like I think I've struggled with self-esteem for much of my life. I've struggled with depression and anxiety for much of my life. And like, to give the people the tools of the things that I've like how I've scratched and clawed my way out, so that we can throw a party, so that we can see what happens. What do you want to do? I don't know. Let's do stuff. Like, you know, I one of the things that has come up for me in ceremonies before is like, why did they make the pyramids? Assuming that humans did in fact make it, which, who knows? But like, why do such a thing? Why do such a dumb thing as to put a bunch of stones together and and then do it again and again and again? Like, what is the deal? Like, why would you do this? And there's something about the answer of just because. It's just like, just because, like, how cool to do something that 12,000 years later we still can't figure out how they did. Like, we still don't know. Like, there's like, I've been to Machu Picchu, and just like, how, the where it is and how it possibly got into existence there. It's so mind-boggling, and it's just got this sense of like, just because. Why did they build it? Just because. And that is an energy that I would like to spend as much time and energy as possible in my lifetime. And that, because it's most fun for me, it is most in flow, it is most of all the things that I want. And so that's where I get the energy for it. It's like, yeah, let's do something cool. Let's go to Mars. Let's do, like, who knows? And so the way I view myself right now is like helping more people have more access to creating the types of lives that they want to live.
So good. I'm glad I asked that question in a very, I don't know, I love the answer. Very beautiful, and honestly a really just beautiful intentional way of like, not really to reason, but just for the flow coming from the heart of just like what you want. And honestly, it makes the world a better place. We need a lot more of that energy. When other people are doing good, it is kind of a selfish thing. You want to be around those people. The world needs more of it. And oh yes, there's so much in that. I appreciate you thoughtfully answering each question and actually taking the time. I've noticed to actually like pause instead of just trying to ramble off what would sound best. I really appreciate that, because you can feel it in each response of like, it's thought out, your but also not necessarily thought out, but like it's coming from the heart of a place that's like embodied, instead of just like, ooh, this would sound cool to say. So I do appreciate the energy that you've created to be able to offer that on this and through your content and everything that you do. So I've appreciated this conversation so much, and I've got so much value from this here, Jason. So thank you for taking the time today to be on this, and I'm so glad we connected in the way that we did through the internet.
What a beautiful thing, right? What a beautiful thing. I'm so thrilled to be here, and yeah, I really appreciate you setting all this up, and I appreciated our conversation last week, kind of in preparation for this, and just appreciate the questions, and providing the space for me to take the scenic route through some of those answers. So yeah, it's really been delightful.
Yeah. So for anybody listening, what is, I guess, like, what's going good for you right now? I know that you do, I think it's one-on-one coaching. Are you offering that? Do you have anything big and upcoming that you would like people to know about? Or this is kind of your time to like fill our ears with like the things that are going on in your life that maybe people can get their hands on, or how they can access you and get to dive deeper into like the work you do? I think so many people can get a lot of value from that. So yeah, what are those things for yourself going on?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, starting with my Instagram, I think I'm putting a lot of time and energy into that right now. I am also
Yeah.
working. And then there's a few tiers when it comes to working with me. I work with people one on one, and you can just send me a DM, or there's applications on my website um, about that. And then I'm working on, come February, some more group programs, some more sort of like um, some workshop type things that the details are still being worked out. Just giving a little bit more access and lower price point than my one-on-one coaching. And then I'm also working on a book, which is I'm
Oh.
probably the most excited about of anything, which is really an exploration of how I went of everything that I've learned about relating as I went from being in a static sort of dead end relationship to being with my now fiance and my person and the woman that I want to spend the rest of my life with, and everything that I've learned about from leaving a relationship to being single to like the whole world of dating to actually how to navigate the experiences that some of which we've talked about today of being in relationship and the challenges that arise there. And so those are some ways. And people can always send me an email or direct message on Instagram if they're interested in connecting. I really enjoy hearing from people and love finding time to connect if people are so inclined. So
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Well, I'm excited for your book. Do you have any ideas of when that's going to be out, or it's kind of mid writing process right now?
it's mid writing process right now. And I go back and forth on like, do I need to set a deadline or do I need to set like I'm going to work on it a certain amount of time every day, and then whenever it's done,
Mm.
it's done. Which has sort of been the route that I've been leaning towards. So at one point it was like, oh, it'd be good to get it done before Valentine's Day. Who knows? I've never written a book before, so I'm still learning a lot in terms of how long it takes, and um, I want it to be a great book. I want people to really get a lot out of it, and um, I don't know how long that's going to take.
Wow. Well, I should hear you're even adopting flow within like that that
It
practice as
wouldn't
well.
wouldn't
So,
wouldn't be
yeah,
right to
excited.
do it any other way, right?
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, yeah, I'm so excited for what you're offering. And honestly, just your page has enough. Like, I've scrolled through that and I'm like, this so valuable. Like, you're very open with just like sharing all the goods because why kind of gatekeep it? Like, I'm sure there's so much more that you dive into in your program and like one on one and stuff, but even just your profile, like, there's so much I've scrolled through and I'm like, yes, like learning things, just relating. So, all the good stuff is there. So, I'll have everything tagged of yours in the show notes and stuff, all your links and your page and everything like that, so people can get access to you. Because I'm sure after this, lots of people will be really intrigued with what more you have on the Instagram side. So we'll tag that. And is there anything else I feel like, or is there anything, one last message you would like to give? If there was like one thing you could say to anybody, what would that be? And then we can kind of end off there. Or if you feel good with what you've said, then we can leave it there. But I want to give you that chance.
You know, without sounding, cliche, I was driving actually last night and drove by this like horrific car crash 3 minutes from my house.
Mm.
And so if I was gonna say anything, it's we don't know how long we have here. We really don't. And so taking some time to just reflect on how beautiful and lucky we are to even experience all of the pain, all of the suffering, all of the worst stuff, that it's still such a gift, just to be here. And however that, however the presence of that changes things for you is sort of up to you. But I hope that you take a moment to think about that.
So beautiful. Thank you for ending off there because so easy to overlook, but so important when, yeah, time is not guaranteed for us. So Beautiful way to end off. Well, thank you so much for, again, the time and being able to just like be able to encapsulate your wisdom and experience in such easy to grasp ways that I feel will add a lot of value to people through this, and honestly added a lot of value to me. So thank you so, so much for being here, and I'm so glad we connected. And yeah, awesome to be able to do this.
You're so welcome, and thank you for having me.